This is an article back from August of last year, but something I haven't played with, and this was an announce. I think this hit preview. Yeah, this was public preview in August. This has since GA'd, but it is working in Microsoft 365 Defender, and more specifically in advanced hunting without the need for KQL. One, you can more easily do some of that advanced hunting stuff in Microsoft 365 Defender. But two, this is another way, and I don't think we've talked about this when we talked about KQL, but it can also be another way to kind of help you learn KQL.
Getting onboarded to these tools without learning KQL, like totally on board. Like folks have to learn data structures and schema and things like that, but it is 100,000% within your best interest as a practitioner of the Microsoft Cloud to learn KQL, or the Kusto query language.
So back to this. Let's jump back over to your documentation now. What do you have for us?
So this is all part of the Microsoft 365 Defender stack. And really what you're talking about is going in to be able to kind of grok all that data that's coming into you from your various Microsoft 365 applications or services that you have lit up. So if you have Office 365 and you have Defender for Cloud for Office 365 lit up, endpoints with Intune, anything like that. There's Defender for Identity, Defender for cloud apps, and say you're doing like cloud apps and you're tracking logins for your users' organization over to Zoom and WebEx in addition to Teams. Like all that information is coming into Defender if you go ahead and turn it on. So I think the docs are pretty straightforward into how to turn it on, what you need to do to get all that going. Once you turn this on, data is basically streaming in all the time from these services. So now you can start to do things like go in and do time-bound queries around that. So show me what happened between A and B, and that's fine. Like you can do that. Kusto is pretty flexible. You can do searches across all tables in a database, things like that. But where it gets cool is when you come in and you say, let's go ahead and do some, let's do some more kind of advanced hunting around that. So I'm going to go ahead and say like the documentation here is a little bit weird because really whether you're using guided mode or advanced mode, you're going across the same data set. It's not like you're going across different data sets. To your point earlier, it's about how you're getting to the point of a query is authored and then executed against the platform. So if you're going down the guided route, you've got a nice little kind of GUI to build out your KQL query. So you can say where time between A and B with like nice little calendar pickers. You don't have to do like a to date time kind of casting, or it'll know the schema of the tables you're going into. So you can say, where event ID is 123, or where OS version is Windows or Linux, or any of those kinds of things as you're going through and doing your hunting. So once you've got it all turned on, you've got Microsoft 365 Defender. Go ahead and hop into that experience. You're going to go ahead and just create a new query. If it was me, because I'm familiar enough with KQL to be dangerous, I would probably just skip over the the guided experience. I'm kind of interested to see what's out there and kind of how that all looks. There is documentation around how to build queries in the query builder. And how that comes together. I think a couple of things there. When you're doing these guided queries, you have to make sure that you're selecting the domain, I'd have to see how this query like maps back, but I imagine like they're equating a domain actually to a table or to a data source on the back end. So what are the kind of what's the scope of your query? What do I want to pull back in it? Do you have any rules around amount of data to pull back? Like, are you going to take only a subset of that data? Are you going to pull back a whole bunch of that data? But then the really cool thing is you can see, like from the screenshots here, it is able to infer the schema across those tables and then just kind of give you nice drop downs for pick this column and pick values within this column kind of thing. So I don't know. I always like to get hands-on with this stuff. Why don't we hop back over to your screen and just get kind of straight into it?
I was trying to remember one other thing, and I don't see it in here off the top of my head. A license. Okay, I thought this was A5. Microsoft 365, not A5, E5, A5 SKU. So this is a 5-level SKU in terms of having Defender and being able to do advanced hunting. I don't think you can do this with any of the E3s, A3s, any of that.
Yeah, so you have to be licensed both for the service and then kind of as an individual to get in and execute the queries and do all those things. So your mileage may vary there. But if you're just playing around with it, I think most folks start out as kind of like a deity or an Uber account. So you shouldn't have too much trouble turning it on in like a test environment, but maybe in production that ends up looking a little different.
For this, we're going to go and play with it. We're in the security center, but I am logged in with one of those CDX tenants. So this is not any particular user's production tenant. This isn't my production tenant. So if you do have access to those CDX tenants, it works good because there's lots of data here and I don't have to show any of my production data. So to start out with, this is in Defender. So the security.microsoft.com. And over here, under the hunting, we have this advanced hunting. And again, because this is CDX, I did notice this the other day. They have some of these queries already here. And these are all some of those KQL queries. So we can see there's like some demo queries in here, summarize users' last public IP addresses. This is part of the demo. Like this one, the stolen images execution. I don't think this one actually returned anything, because this is designed to walk through a demo and maybe actually put this file somewhere. But there are some of these queries that are pre-created. We can get rid of new query, some MDAV signatures, and you can see these can get kind of complex, Scott. Like some of these queries that they have in here are a bit crazy.
You know, so I would say if you're somebody who comes from a T-SQL or an MS SQL background, like if you've ever done that, you're comfortable in that world, like learning KQL is I would say very
Pretty
straightforward. Like it's just another query language, and it's not too bad. If this is your first exposure to working with databases, because that's really what we're doing, right? We're working with databases and tables and columns, and then the data and the data types within those columns. It can take a little bit to get on board with. But like when you look at that and you say it's scary, really what we're saying is here's a table. Take that table where, you know, config ID is equal to this and context isn't null. And then all those things that say extend, those basically say, make me a new column and put this type of data in the column. So let me manipulate it in this way, format it in this way, those kinds of things. So really all that query is doing is, pulling out a subset of data and then joining it back to itself. Yeah.
And then doing some unions and yeah. So that is within advanced hunting, you do have some queries. So some of these queries, I would say, are very specific to this demo environment. Like some of these where it's based on specific people. I'm going to assume that this is probably doing some identity based on a particular username, identity logins for a user. In a normal environment, you do have some of these queries out of the box. And then to your point, Scott, you mentioned the schemas, the databases. Here's all of those databases. that have that different data in them. So those device login events you talked about, you can go through here and easily just start digging through what are these different columns, what are the different tables, the different databases, uh, all within this advanced hunting and these M365 logs. You can go over to these three dots, the ellipses, and more tabs, and you'll have all your existing queries, but this is where you can also go in and create a new query. And you have those two options, query and editor, which is going to be that KQL experience. It just gives you this pane. You can go start typing it in. But now we have this query in builder option as well. And this is the one that we were talking about. So even in here, it gives you some examples. So high confidence phishing email delivered to inbox. You can load some examples in here, and it starts giving you all kinds of pop-ups about what you're doing. Next, 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 done. It gives you some of those pre-created queries using this query builder instead of the KQL. You can go in and run it, and just like a KQL query, if there was actually something there, you would get some data back. But what if, let's go start this one from scratch. Go do a new one. There we go. In here. So when you start building it, and to your point, Scott, it's kind of looking at different tables. So this is, what is that domain you want to look at? Do you want to go look at endpoints? Do you want to look at apps and identities, email and collaboration? And I am assuming, based on what I've done before, this is actually just looking at, I can't go look at my schema anymore.
You got to hit the little ellipsis there.
There we go. Schema, this is looking at these different tables. So if you notice this is endpoints, apps and identities, email and collaboration. This is apps and identities, emails and collaboration. Devices is probably that endpoint, and it's possible some of those are combining a couple of these categories. But this is what's giving you those tables, and you can even see help give you different options that you're going to search for based on the scheme of those databases. So we can say, let's just do everything, because it gives us lots of options there. And then from here, there again are some sample queries, so we can go look at some of those queries they've built. But from here, it's just starting to pick out like what filters you want to look at. What application name, once it loads. Yeah, so we're going to narrow this down so we don't have to sit here and wait. So we'll just go to email and collaboration. And you can see this is really focused. Email and collaboration is emails. So you can set something like a delivery location. If we wanted to search for a specific email address, specific subjects. And here, to your point, there's not going to be a distinct, because it could be email address. Maybe they could have gone and figured that out based on what's in the logs. Realistically, you could go type in any email address, threat types. Let's just look for malware and phishing there. Recipient, sender, sent from domain. We're not going to worry about that. And right from there, you can go in, set some of those, and run a query. And this will start returning that data. So 135 items. Again, to your point, in the background, it's just running KQL. So if we wanted to go in and start scoping this down, this is where you can go choose date filters. Everything was in the last 7 days, because I spun this up yesterday. I wonder if I can get, there we go, last 24 hours, 19 items. And if you want to save your detection rule, you need more permissions. This is one of those. In this demo tenant, CDX, I don't have permission to do that. But right next to that is that edit in KQL. So we built this already just using these drop-down filters. Edit in KQL just toggles you right over and gives you what that KQL actually is. So like you had said, we're looking at a few different tables here. We're looking at delivery, location, threat types, and just building out a KQL query. Run that, and it's going to give us that exact same data in theory. It's still loading. There it goes. So we get those same 19 items.
So one of the things that I never liked about this experience, and I don't like it over in Log Analytics, and I don't like it over in Sentinel either, is when you do the auto query builders like this, so you have it scoped to the last 24 hours. It's not clear in the KQL they generate how they scoped that condition. Like which timestamp field are they looking at, and which table and which timestamp? Are they looking across timestamp in all of those tables? Because what's going to happen is you've done a union. So if each one of those tables has a timestamp in it, you're really going to have timestamp 1, timestamp 2 kind of thing in there.
Yep.
And it's going to start to get weird for you. So I always wished that they could pull those scoping conditions for timing down so that people could understand like how a 2-date time cast works, and then how like a where clause with a between, or you can do really cool things with date times in Kusto. Like you can do something like, rather than looking at the last 24 hours, you could do like, say you wanted to go look at yesterday and you want to see everything from yesterday forward. You can say like, where start of day greater than or equal to ago 1 day. So you can do like funky things like that.
So you would like to see this like where.
So you could do like where timestamp greater than or equal to.
Let's do greater than or equal to.
And then do ago, or do start of day.
Ago, there we go.
Yeah, so ago 1 day. So you can say like, hey, give me everything from 1 day ago. But that's 1 day ago from now. You could also do like start of day, end of day. Like there's all these built-in kind of helper
like
functions.
Ago, and this is just 7 days. So we could do like 3 days here instead, which gives you some of that advantage of, and this is interesting. So when you go put that in, all of a sudden it changes.
Yeah, it detects it and
detects it and says, hey, we set it in the query. It's not set up here anymore. But
yeah, but when you
I'm with you, like why can't they just put that in the query? Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to send it to somebody else, I think it's very confusing that you send somebody else what's ultimately a time scoped query without any timings in it, and then they need to know how to put that piece in there. That makes it difficult sometimes. But you know, it is what it is. That's one of my pet peeves. Like, because it's trying to teach you. I think the goal of these things, like a query builder, is ultimately to teach you how to write the query yourself, so you don't need to use the query builder, right? The query builder is like, it's a learning tool and kind of something that can enable you to get to this next step. And they skip a critical component of that, because what is Kusto really good at? Time series analysis. Like time is in just like the foundational thing that Kusto is good for. So yeah, if any PMs on the Kusto side are listening, I would love to see some of these products improved that way.
But once you do this too, Scott, you can't actually go back to that UI. So once you're in here, you're done with your builder. So if you want to go try it again and play with it some more, you do have to go create a new one. There's no way, like some tools. I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, and I'm not coming up with one. Where you can like toggle back and forth between the code view and the UI view. There's no toggle here. It's once you toggle to the code view, you're stuck in the code view. One other thing I wanted to show is this toggle too lets you do more filters. So that first one we showed was just a single filter. We were just looking at junk email, failed, threat types. I think we did malware and phishing. But if you wanted to start adding some additional ones, like do some ands, some ors, add some subgroups, so you're looking for this, or these, anding these two and then within those do some additional filters around email events. I think like file events. You could go look at file name, file size. So when you toggle this and get some additional filters, you do start getting um, some more of those options in here where you can build out additional queries, more complex queries, put in your ands and your ors and subgroupings and all of that. Um, Again, for me, I if you're used to the UI, I get this. For me, I will say when you start getting all these subgroups upon subgroups upon subgroups and all your ands and ors, sometimes this actually gets more confusing for me than just reading the um, actual query.
uh, yeah, I don't think there's any way to avoid learning KQL. Again, these are like tools that kind of get you over to the other side. I could also see this being a nicety just for somebody who's wants to come in and do something quickly, and like this isn't their day-to-day kind of role. Is going in and looking at all this stuff. But ideally, over time, what you're going to do is kind of come up with a set of canned queries, like you earlier, like you've got queries over on the left there. So you can do things like have shared queries in your environment. You can have your individual queries. Potentially over time, you start to kind of can those queries and get them together, and people know where to go. Like, I'm just going to go run this query and maybe adjust this parameter on it, kind of thing. Or you can start to build out dashboards and things like that around it as well. So, Azure Monitor, like workbooks, support embedding KQL queries and charts, and doing like tabular result sets and all those kinds of things in them. And at the end of the day, well, actually, I don't know for M365. For Defender, this is just another Kusto cluster, right? Like I can still hook up to this over standard like Kusto things. Like if I wanted to come in and connect to the cluster, as long as I have rights to connect to it, say over like OAuth, then I should be able to embed the result in like an Azure Monitor workbook or something like that.
Yes.
Like I can with Sentinel and other parts of the Azure stack.
Yeah, you should be able to. I've never tried. I guess to your point, I have never gone in and tried to connect to this, like figuring out, I guess, what the cluster actually is. Like you go into Log Analytics, Sentinel, any of those, they just have native connectors, and it's like go pull in my Office 365 stuff, and it's gonna pull in all of this stuff. Now, if you wanted to go connect to it from something else, I know there's other tools that have connectors to Office 365, to Microsoft 365, so I'm sure it's documented somewhere how you would go connect to this from really pretty much any tool, as long as, to your point, you have the rights, you can do the OAuth authentication against it and connect to all of these data sources.
Sure. So while you're in this video, we should talk about one more thing while we're here in kind of the query builder. So you've executed your query and you've got a set of results. So you've got your results down there at the bottom.
Yep.
Go ahead and hit customize columns real quick down in the results view.
Customize the columns.
Yep. So I think like normally one of the things you would do in a Kusto query as well is kind of like, it's a good habit to project only the columns you need, basically select and say bring back only these columns kind of thing.
Yep.
So it looks like the automated queries try and come up with like a constrained set, but you can always go through to this customized column view and pick all the additional things you want to see, and then bring those into that tabular view down there at the bottom, especially if you're going to take this and like export it out to a CSV or Excel or something like that. That could be very helpful for you.
Yes, because you can see Woodgrave Bank is apparently my biggest offender of sending junk mail. In particular, this person. I don't know who that is. Some demo tenant person. But yeah, you're right. That is a good call out of going in, being able to customize those, And then once you do it, like you said, you can go in and export these as well, and it'll just export those query results to a CSV. I was curious why my other one wasn't working. Maybe it's because all of this is in quarantine. There we go, 775. So this is where then I could go in and add that subfilter. This is what I was trying to get to. File events, file type, and we all know executables are usually harmful. But apparently, oh no, and? See, this is where, so we're looking for delivery location, and it has a threat type. And within there, this and or shouldn't actually matter since we just have one event in here. But none of my phishing or malware apparently have attachments of an executable. But yeah, then same as before, we can always go in, edit in KQL, and it'll go show that source table where it's at, and adding that extra where file type is an executable. So kind of a nifty, to your point, a nifty tool for where you're learning it. You're never going to, like going in and writing something like this in the advanced hunting to summarize users' last public IP addresses. This is probably not something you're going to be able to write very easily in the query builder. Something like this, you're not going to be able to write in the query builder. You can get started with this, kind of see what you're going to query. To your point, Scott, maybe do some of those, figuring out what's actually in some of those columns. But you're probably still going to want to move to just writing straight KQL pretty quickly when you get into this advanced hunting.
We should probably talk about a couple other things while we're in this experience, which aren't unique to Sentinel. They're just kind of like built into this, I think, simplified Custo view that's in all these services. So like when you're on one of these queries with a result set.
All right, let me go get some new results. Not there. Okay.
Yep. So you've got things like down at the bottom, like we talked about customizing columns. You've got charting available in Custo as well. So Custo can render time charts, pie charts, line charts, area charts, all kinds of different things in there. So typically those are going to be things that you would write in the query. Like maybe the last line of your query is, pipe and then render out to a time chart, and you select your x-axis, y-axis columns, things like that, or you split things across panels, whatever. But you can quickly change all those chart types just in that this native experience. So, if you're thinking about like, hey, what am I going to do with this data? Because I need to bring it over someplace else to visualize it, which I think is something like fairly common with Custo. You end up with these big tabular data sets, and then you want to do things like show me the count of users over time on a line chart. You can do it all within this tool. You don't need to export the data out to a CSV and then bring it over to Excel or Power BI or anything like that. Like you can just kind of do it all in here. So I recommend folks, have a play around with that as well if they're looking at it. The other thing that you can do beyond kind of taking this query and saying it's done, so you've got that save button up there at the top. So you can save the query. That's how you kind of put it in a folder. Is it is it your query? Is it a shared query? Whatever it happens to be. That's all good kind of stuff. And then you've got that share link button as well. And if you click that, you can give people a direct link in to execute your query. So if you close out of the share screen there real quick, or save screen there real quick. And then you've got share link right next to save.
Yep. Share next to save. Yes, the share link.
Yep. So if you take that and copy it out and just open a new tab and you look at that gnarliness of it, it actually takes you right back into the same place you were. And if you're like a brand new user to it, it actually takes the query and puts it in the query box and everything for you, which is kind of nice.
But it doesn't actually run the query. It just shares the
It
query
doesn't.
itself.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You have to hit run query.
Oh,
If you
go
wanted to
ahead.
share the results, you'd have to, export them or do
Actually.
something like that. Like if somebody didn't have access to that environment.
Right. So I was looking at the chart type too, and again, to your point of putting this out, like there's no way to customize your charts if you're going to do it in here. Like this one, for example, when you're looking at summarize users last public IP, when you select chart type, it doesn't actually give you that KQL for how it's generating the chart. To me, you're summarizing the last user's public IPs, but there's a part of me that maybe wants to see it by IP. Like, are there users that are logging in from different IPs? Or if you want to customize that chart type or how this is displayed in terms of your x-axis and your y-axis and all of that, you're going to have to learn that KQL again.
Yeah. So I would say the documentation for Kusto is fairly robust. Sometimes it can be a little confusing. I know sometimes when like I'm working on things or I'm going through something like new in Kusto with a peer, the first thing we'll do is hop into the docs and we'll go, I have no idea what that means or what it's doing. So sometimes you just kind of have to play around with it. But for things like charting, it's all pretty straightforward, right? You can render a pie chart, render a time chart, render a line chart, all those kinds of things. Or to your point about like IP analysis, the actual cool thing about IP analysis might be to do like anomaly detection. So given a user that logs in n times over a course of a week, can we automatically detect when that user logs into some place that they don't typically log into? And that's like another great use for Kusto is like time series anomalies.
Right.
And you can't do that through the guided view. Like you're going to have to go play around with that, learn how to make a series, how to take that series and project it out into either one of the built-in plugins or one of the kind of built-in time series analysis functions, things like that.
Yep, and that's what I haven't got and looked at. I should go do open query editor. See, none of these. They need to put more data in here, Scott. Email exfiltration. Run query. There we go. Maybe we'll get something back here. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do. And again, I would say, oh, my query limit's exceeded.
So on your last line there, just put in a pipe and say like take 100. Just so you get something back.
Yep. So I get something back there. There we go. Mail items accessed. Yeah, so it is. It's interesting. I'm curious your thoughts. So advanced hunting, we looked at it. You have some stuff in here. You can create some of these custom detection rules. Like you can go over here then and within your hunting have these custom detection rules and set up different alerts around them, when it was run, next run, that type of stuff. I feel like even this, you can get some basic stuff, even though this is advanced hunting. And you can do a lot with this. You can have your custom detection rules. If you really want to get into this and digging through all of this, you really end up needing to connect this to like an Azure Sentinel or something that has a little bit more functionality even than the advanced hunting. What's your take? Or do you think, can you actually get everywhere you'd want to do for in advanced hunting with these?
What do you want to do over here that you can't do in that
maybe
you feel like you can't,
or
you would
maybe
have to do in Sentinel?
Pulling in more data.
So I mean, Sentinel's kind of the same in that you've got an underlying set of Kusto tables, like databases and tables.
Right.
And those are all coming from their various sources. And you could do the same kind of thing, like, hey, take this canned query and run it on a schedule. And should it have results, go do this, which is effectively what you're saying with like detection rules. So I think you very much do the same things. What you might want to do is combine the data that's here over with other tables that are maybe more in just your regular Azure log analytics world, and you can totally do that on the Sentinel side, which I maybe you can do it over here. I've never seen the capability to do it. Like where it just exposes like the other clusters and other databases that are out there through the schema side of things for you to be able to know it exists. But I believe if you go over to Sentinel and Sentinel's all lit up, you do see the same tables inside of Sentinel.
I'm gonna go find out. I think Sentinel is lit up in here. Oh, which one? Now I don't know which one it is. Incidents logs.
Yeah, so you can see like this native like web experience, eerily familiar to what we
Right?
just
Like it's
experienced on the other side.
I forget now off the top of my head. Azure Resources Change Tracking. I don't believe they're actually pulling in the Microsoft 365 stuff here.
But you can do that. There is a connector for M365 over to
365. Sentinel. Oh, it is in
there.
Yep.
So there's your Defender connector. So you can go ahead and turn that on if it's not turned on already.
It looks like it is connected. I guess, oh, you know what? Let's see.
You go back a section. Really what you want is the M365 Defender connection to be lit up.
So that one was lit up.
Not the Office 365 one.
Sorry, back to my connectors. Data connectors. 365. This one. I think.
Yeah.
Well, so and I think this is where I feel like your advanced hunting is still a little bit more limited. Maybe that was it. It's more pulling in the data. Is Microsoft 365 Defender is going to pull in a lot of the identities, the cloud apps, but I am not aware of a way like the Office 365 one, where that one's pulling in the Exchange, the SharePoint, the Teams. Like this advanced hunting doesn't have, you get your email events around and URL clicks in your email and collaboration, but there's no SharePoint in Teams data in here, nor a way to get it in here that I'm aware of.
You're expecting too much out of it. You are in Microsoft 365 Defender. You're not in the Office 365 audit log right now. So it's kind of different data sources. So you have to. I get it, but I think like the right answer is this is a tool specifically for a constrained set of data sources in the Microsoft 365 Defender stack. Like if you want to pull it all together, Sentinel's probably the place to do that.
And I think, and maybe that's where I was going with that is, I guess maybe I expected some of those data sources to be in here because, well, we're in Microsoft 365 Defender. This is still where you would do all of that type of stuff. Like this is where you can get to some of that activity log to go. Well, not this one. The audit logs in the compliance center. But this is still where you'd go in to monitor your Microsoft 365 security as a whole. Like anytime you go do Microsoft 365 security for SharePoint, for Teams, for all of that, they route you back here.
Architecture, right? It's you're thinking about it as holistically as the Microsoft 365 stack.
Exactly.
And it's not. It's the Microsoft 365 Defender stack. Like it is scoped to just that and just the things that Defender covers. But you you can have your cake and eat it too. It's arguably just going to cost you more money because now you're going to have to egress that data out of the Defender stack and connect it over to Sentinel and the log analytics workspaces and things that are associated with Sentinel.
Yes, and that's where I was going with this advanced hunting thing, is you're gonna be limited to these tables, this data, versus Sentinel, where you can go in and pull in all these other data connectors related to Microsoft 365, to Office 365, um, to all of these other services that you may be taking advantage of or using within that product suite. That is Microsoft 365, unless you're
It,
looking at
it,
the
it depends on
connector
what
in
you're good with
Sentinel.
and how much you want to pay for it. Like, I mean, really, like, ideal world, you would just come in and have all this stuff lit up. But the reality is, it costs money to deliver the service, and then somebody, us, the
Right.
consumer, has to pay for it. So I think it's one of your considerations along the way is like, you might not be able to light up just Defender to meet your underlying business goals. Like, depending on what that goal is, and the set of constraints that are introduced by that goal, you might have to do things like, light up Sentinel, learn a little bit more about Azure and what's going on there. Like, if you're a pure M365 customer and you're going, what the heck is Azure Sentinel, or I guess Microsoft Sentinel, whatever we're calling it these days, then more learning for you to do.
Yes, and you should absolutely go look at it because, yeah. See, this is where you can pull an Azure Active Directory. Like, again, my mindset, I get, yes, you have to pay for it. It's a lot more audit logs. In my head, the way, to your point, it's been architected, I would have expected more of this stuff in my Microsoft 365 Defender when I'm trying to secure Office 365.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, right? Like, the identity folks want to pretend Azure AD doesn't exist, and yeah, it's all Entra, and the Defender folks want to pretend Sentinel doesn't exist, because why would you go pay for Sentinel when you can pay for Defender, when really you should be paying for both so that you can have it all and get it together. It is a very kind of confusing space to be in. Yeah.
100%. But that was a little bit of a sidetrack for advanced hunting. But I thought this was interesting. It was something fun to take a peek at and look into. But end of the day, yeah, you may want to expand well beyond what you can do with the query builder and even what you can do with advanced hunting in Microsoft 365 Defender.
Indeed.
But with that, I have another presentation to go prepare for. All
Yeah.
right.
As always, thanks for the time.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.